So one of the areas that we've been seeing increased opportunity in is financial inclusion, and specifically the use of technology in breaking down barriers and access to finance amongst underserved groups. So we are very excited to have with us today Lienda Kavindele from Lendable, which is a private debt fund that invests in innovative financial technology companies or fintechs in frontier markets across Africa and Asia. And we also have with us Eskenazi from 60 Decibels, an organization that champions the idea that if you want to measure impact, the best way is to directly speak to the people experiencing that impact. A simple enough idea, yet it is not as widely done as you would think in the impact investment sector. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I'd like to first invite you to just give a quick introduction to the audience and your quick elevator pitch for Lendable and 60 Decibels.
Sure. Would you like to go first?
Sure. I hope everybody can hear me well. I'm Sol. I work at 60 Decibels. I am the head of data products there. Essentially, we're trying to think about how do we use the 20 million data points that we collected over the last couple of years and make them usable to investors and social enterprises and other types of organizations when they think about creating more social impact. What 60 Decibels does is essentially we talk directly to the people that are experiencing impact. We try to understand what are the negative impacts that are being created, what are the positive impacts that are being created. Then we turn all of that data into insights and we share it with the organizations that we work with. We work with local NGOs to corporates all over the world. Since we started 5 years ago, we have worked with over 1,000 organizations, and that's where the 20 million data points that I referenced at the beginning comes from.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lienda Kavindele from Lendable. So as mentioned, we are an innovative debt financing platform. We currently have 2 funds that are financial inclusion funds operating across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We're also launching our first decarbonization fund at the end of this year. We're very excited. As well as another financial inclusion fund that has an innovative step in it because we are looking at gender and how we can include gender step downs as part of our offering to the investors into the companies. And so we are really proud of our heritage as a data-driven organization. And basically, we have a proprietary technology platform called Maestro that integrates directly with the fintechs that we invest in so that we can get underlying real-time data of the end borrowers to really understand a lot of different things, credit assessments or impact assessments or just general monitoring that we use that information for. At the moment, from an impact perspective, we're actually really on a journey to understand how we can leverage the transactional data to provide us with a better insight into the impact that we're generating for the end borrowers. This is a project that we're also going to be sharing a little bit more about later. Maybe one other thing to add about Lendable is, in addition to getting the information from the fintechs about the end borrowers, one thing that we do to just give confidence to the markets, and primarily one of the reasons why Maestro was created, because of the data asymmetries and people not feeling confident about investing in companies in some of the regions in which we invest, we use that information to also verify the transaction. So we take the loan tape that we get from the end borrowers and we match that against bank statements as well as audited financial statements, which generally gives us all the confidence around the performance of the business. Last thing to say, before it becomes a monologue, is that we also do co-investments as well as offer monitoring and verification for other institutional investors who really want to understand the impact that they're generating on their on end borrowers, or who really want to understand sort of the credit profiles of the fintechs that they're investing in.
Thank you. So if we sort of step back to how you select fintech partners at Lendable, so like with any technology, fintech can be a force for good, but it can also cause considerable harm if used irresponsibly. And so it's really important for us as investors in Lendable that you have the right processes and systems in place to identify fintechs that are truly mission aligned, that are committed to responsible lending, providing financial products that are transparent and affordable and not trapping their borrowers in endless cycles of debt that they're unable to repay. So tell us a little bit about your partner selection process and the sort of framework, the impact assessment framework that you use.
Sure. So very broadly, we are financial inclusion funds, or at least our first current funds are financial inclusion funds, but the impact thematics that we invest against are economic livelihood, so ensuring that people are able to generate a income through the investments that we make and improve their economic situations. The second is focusing on access to financial services, and the third is access to essential services. So in many ways, similar to a lot of impact investors here who partnered with institutions like Tideline to be able to develop your sort of frameworks, we've done the same. We leverage from a lot of different organizations and a lot of different frameworks that exist to use those materials for screening, for DD, etc. So in that way, from an impact perspective, I think we kind of touch on all the different areas that most people here touch. Where I think Lendable goes a little bit deeper, and what really excites us, particularly from a responsible investing perspective, is that we're trying to leverage the transactional data that we get, the borrower data that we get, to really understand, how they're perceiving or how they're experiencing the products that they're receiving. And what I mean by this is, again, mainly from a client protection perspective. When we get information from the end borrowers, which, by the way, we've got about 14 billion data points at this stage from 73 different markets, which is a lot of information to take in. What we try to do with that information is then to say, well, from a client protection perspective, particularly when we're looking at affordability, which tends to be one of the biggest challenges in the markets that we're dealing with, we want to understand, can customers actually really pay for these products? So we have access, the type of granular data that we have access to would include, default rates, but not just, the number, but who's defaulting, where, are they female, are they male, is this in a rural area and not in a rural area? So we're able to get geographic information, we're able to get gender information, really able to use that sort of analysis to understand if, there's a certain response to a certain product by a certain demographic. We also are able to look at something around pricing. I think at this point we've accumulated quite a lot of information from all the borrowers that we've assessed. So when we get a borrower that's in a similar fintech sector, we can do some price benchmarking just to understand, is this really a feasible sort of pricing strategy that this company is employing? Is there, any areas that we think that they could potentially tweak their pricing model based on what we're seeing across the markets that we're investing in? We're also able to see fees relative to principal payments, relative to a lot of different sort of numbers that are in relation to the transaction. So we can basically say or see whether a business is deriving most of its revenues from penalty payments as opposed to any other revenue source, and we can actually speak to them about that and understand that. So there's a lot of things we can do with the data. It gets me very excited. So maybe one or two more things to share, and then I'll hand over. So when we speak to management, one of the things we always hear, particularly around pricing, is this particular product is really expensive because it's base level, and we have to factor in the risks of the type of demographic that we are, we've all heard this story before, but they say things like, but eventually these customers will graduate to better term products once they've proven that they're credit-worthy customers. We can see that. We can see whether this is actually really happening. Are people transitioning from these products and really expensive products to better term products, and on what basis? So lots of things I can say, lots of things you can see, but I hope I've given you a flavor for the fact that Maestro really does get to granular sort of information that gives you a better sense for the impact, a deeper sense for the impact beyond just alignment with SDGs, which of course there's nothing wrong with, but it is one just layer of impact that you're generating.
Thank you. So you've talked about data. Actually, in one of our earlier conversations that we had, I remember you made this excellent point about trying to triangulate the information. So you're looking at the data that's coming through in Maestro, you're looking at what the fintechs are telling you, but then there's an important piece about hearing directly from the borrowers and the more qualitative aspects of impact measurement. So if you can tell us about some of the challenges you face in getting that more qualitative information, how does an organization like 60 Decibels potentially help you address some of those challenges?
Sure. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, in the sense that we try to triangulate all pieces of information that you get. Data can only tell you one thing, and management will always tell you what they want to tell you. But really, if you're thinking about impact and you think about the end borrowers, the customer's voice is so, so important. And it's a challenge. We're a small team, and we're spread geographically. We've got, we're growing and a lot of investments. It's very difficult to be on the ground to get the sort of scale of qualitative data that you need to be able to really understand the impact that you're having directly from the customer. So that's where 60 Decibels comes in. We find that their product is so helpful being able to speak to, we were only really able to speak to about 5 or 10 people when we're there for diligence and ongoing monitoring. They can do that at a scale that is significantly bigger and gives us a lot more insight into how particular products or services are really impacting end customers. So with that information from Maestro, information from just, general diligence and our investment team, we feel that we really are targeting companies that are making a difference from a financial inclusion perspective.
Thanks, Lienda. I'm going to turn to Sol now.
Yeah.
If you can tell us about the 60 Decibels FinTech Index, tell us about the different dimensions and indicators of impact that you try and capture in this index. What are the sorts of questions that you ask customers of fintechs, of the kinds of fintechs that Lendable invests in? And how does this build on the work that you've done in the microfinance sector?
Yes. So a couple of years ago, 3 years ago actually, we developed the Microfinance Index, working with over 100 microfinance all over the world to try to understand their impact across different dimensions. That was quite successful in the sense that we were able to capture impact across a number of dimensions and then rank these different MFIs across these dimensions. If you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend that you go to our website. We have some really cool visualizations about our work. So building on the work that we've done with the MFIs, which is now a yearly exercise, we have decided to also do a similar exercise with fintechs around the world. And in essence, the things that we like to understand working with fintechs are five key dimensions of impact. One is access. So are the customers accessing this type of product for the first time? Are there other alternatives in the market? What is the inclusivity of that particular product? Another area that we look into is impact. So is the customer increasing their income, increasing the growth of their business? Another area that we look into is customer protection. As Lienda was hinting, that is such an important area for fintechs. We want to make sure that, the aspect that we really look into is whether the fintechs are actually trying to protect those customers. So do customers understand the terms and conditions? Are they facing any unexpected fees? Are they being provided with guidance to avoid scams or fraud? So that is our theme within customer protection. Then another key area that we look into is customer experience in general. So are they experiencing any particular challenge with the product or service, or more broadly with that fintech? So those are the main themes that we look into when it comes to our FinTech Index. So far, we work with 50 fintechs, and we are hoping to scale that up to significantly more and do this as part of a regular yearly exercise to try to understand how fintechs are impacting customers.
Thank you. One thing that we've touched upon earlier is sort of talking about negative impacts. And how do you ensure that the fintechs that are participating in this index aren't the ones who are already sort of leading in terms of client protection and socially responsible lending practices? How do you ensure that the index is truly representative of the sector and is capturing the full diversity of customer experiences?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we do is make sure that the results are anonymous. So obviously that then essentially makes it easy for somebody to say yes to participate in our index. We do ask if you're a top 10 in terms of like impact performance, will you like your name to be showcased in our reports, our visualizations and whatnot? And pretty much 100% of the organizations say yes, of course, if we're a top performer, we would like to be seen. But generally, we anonymize the data. So, if there's an investor or if there's another peer organization that wants to see the results, they wouldn't be able to pinpoint who that is on a particular chart. And I think that's really important to incentivize participation. But outside of that, I think the insights that we share with organizations, whether it is the fintech itself or an investor, can be very valuable in order to mitigate risk or just simply improve customer experience. So those are the two key benefits that we try to put front and center to ensure that there's more fintechs participating.
Finally, I'd like to invite you both to sort of share with us a little bit about this new partnership that you're working on. Tell us what is the partnership about, and how is this going to lead to better outcomes for the customers of the fintechs that you're investing in?
Sol has been driving a lot of this project, so I'll have her go a little bit more into the detail. But I think why we're excited about this as Lendable is that we have such a wealth of transactional data. I may add anonymized. I don't think I said that earlier. We don't know who these customers are. We just know information about them. But we have such a wealth of transactional data, and they have such a wealth of customer on-the-ground information. And we are looking at the same thing, but just with different perspectives. To be able to bring two sets of data that wealthy together, we're excited about what sort of outcomes we're really going to be able to get from that, what sort of questions we're really going to be able to answer. So we are still really exploring the depths of what two sets of information like that can bring. But ultimately, we're feeling like it will give us better insights even beyond what we're already achieving individually around what sort of products are really impacting people's lives, what sort of structure of a product works. Are people more responsive to this or more responsive to that? What kind of fintechs are, enabling these kinds of products that people are most responsive to, et cetera. So there's a wealth of things that can be explored. I think we're still finalizing that, but ideally, it's an output we would want to share broadly.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that there's a lot of power in being able to look at impact on operational/transactional data together at the customer level, and that's what we're trying to do. So when you see, for example, that a particular organization has been able to improve impact significantly, you do wonder what are the drivers of that. And then that with transactional data and other impact data points that we collect, you can start to paint a picture of that theory of change and what actually makes a difference. So that's the sort of like the genesis of all of this. But outside of that, I think what we want to make sure is being able to provide at the due diligence stage or later on when you're doing monitoring and evaluation, data points that can help you truly understand the full impact space. So,
thank you. I'd like to sort of throw open the floor if anyone in the audience has questions for Lienda or Sol.
Hi, thank you. Great to hear from both of you. Sarah Falls from The Good Economy, and we're actually right now working with CGAP, specifically looking on how to improve sort of outcomes measurement and management. But I'm curious to the extent to which outcomes data is then, you were sort of both touching on it, then you can actually start, understand the drivers of what's improving, say, economic livelihoods in terms of product design or targeting. And I don't think we're quite there yet, and that's what they really want to drive good practice on. So you're clearly at the forefront of that. I'd love to hear your thinking, how it gets into decision making, and also at the board level, where we're still hearing that MFIs and fintech firms, their boards are still focused probably more on the financial performance of the company than the outcomes performance. So that would be good to hear.
Yeah, I'll start, and Lienda, feel free to complement with anything. But personally, I think one of the key benefits I see of being able to combine our data is the fact that we can start to paint a picture of what type of products actually drive impact. So for example, is it a savings product? Is it a loan product? Is it another type of product? And even just like that base layer, you can go a level deeper and say, okay, what type of loan is actually driving this type of impact? We currently do not have that data, and that's the beauty of the partnership that we're trying to do, that we can get really granular about what are the specific things about a particular fintech product that is driving this particular outcome. So that's where the partnership comes together.
Yeah, no, that's 100% it. Nothing to add to that.
Yeah. And the question around boards being more focused on financial performance.
An interesting one. I have to say, we probably partner with quite mission-aligned companies, and I will be honest, sometimes the impact feels anecdotal, and other times it does feel like intentional. But ultimately, if the product itself is something that we believe to be benefiting people from an impact perspective, then ultimately the board would be wanting to grow that, would be wanting to expand that, would be wanting to scale that. And so even if their intention didn't come in with wanting somebody to wake up feeling like they have, more financial security, that's the outcome of the product that they're creating, then for us, we believe that impact is still being generated. And so in our diligence process, it's really important to ascertain that that's actually really the outcome of the product.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one additional comment to that, as we've been trying to build our fintech index, one of the things that we notice is that investors are really interested in understanding the risk of this particular fintechs, and the data that we provide them, even though it's impact data, there's like a huge component of how they can use that for risk mitigation and ensuring that they're investing in the right organizations.
Yeah. Can I just add to that, actually, honestly, because when we started out as Lendable Maestro, we were utilizing this data for credit assessments completely. There was no sort of impact angle to that, and that's something that since I've joined, we've really been building. And so you're very right, like that, the lens is slightly different, but the data is the same, and ultimately, if defaults are happening on one side, it's not good for the impact or for the financial performance of a business.
Thank you for that, really interesting. I just have a question, sort of a high-level question, which is, what's the difference between access to finance for underserved communities and usury?
Sorry, I didn't understand the second part you meant.
So it's expensive to lend money to underserved communities, so they need to pay a rate of return. Where does access to finance stop being a good thing and usury start?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's something that we're constantly confronting, and I think this is the reason why it's important to have that triangulation. So, like I said in one of the examples, we'll go to a fintech and say to them that, we think that your pricing relative to what we've seen in our benchmarks is fairly high. And, we don't really think that it's an investable opportunity for us. Then you go and have a conversation with the customers on the ground, and they say, well, outside of this product, I'm going to go to a predatory, source to be able to get this. And, the impact of that would be greater than, just trying to find a way to make what this current product is providing for us work. And so for us, it's really then understanding, like, what are those trade-offs? Is there a commitment from management to actually address that? So that's when we're looking at things like graduation. If they're saying, well, yes, it is high, but they will graduate, then we are interrogating that. If we don't feel like the outcomes of their responses really make sense, then it's not an investable opportunity for us. But it is very rare that we do find that there are companies that are so far off the scale from a pricing perspective that they are not a worthy opportunity. Usually what would be, and it's happened twice since I've joined, which has been a year now, is that we've had covenants around pricing. And we've ensured that the borrower has seen that through. But it's not an easy and straightforward conversation. I don't want to make it seem like we have all the answers, panacea. It is really just triangulating that information and getting an informed view that gives you comfort that you are still more on the right side than not.
But just to add to what you're saying, so part of the project that we're doing together is to find that trade-off. So you can think about the most impactful organizations in terms of like just measuring it in terms of impact, and then looking at different characteristics of products and which ones are the ones that are driving that particular impact, and trying to find those that perhaps are driving both financial returns and impact returns. That is part of like the work that we're trying to do together.
I'm just curious if there are any large banks and financial institutions in rich economies which have any interest in your services, or would they just prefer not to know?
We haven't. We've never been approached by them, so I don't know what the outcome of that would be, but usually it's institutions that are institutional investors that are looking to go into emerging markets and just needing that validated confidence around the performance of particular businesses. Sometimes we're looking at full-on portfolios, other times it's just a specific opportunity that they're just not really sure and they don't have the visibility of that information that we do.
So just to add to that, so 60 Azul has worked with a number of fintechs, primarily in Latin America, who are some of the biggest players in Latin America. So we've seen that they want to understand where those risk points and impact points are. And aside of that, one of the things that we're currently doing is a panel. So panel studies where essentially we go directly to customers and we try to understand the impact across a number of different fintechs. And then we provide that data back to investors or other parties that may be interested.
Any other questions? No? Good. All right, but I think that brings us to the end of our annual Impact Showcase. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here as well. And I think we're now going to move on to the drinks, which are just right through there. Do stick around. We'd love to talk to you more about Snowball. Thank you. Thank you very much.